Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may not have prepared you for. As always, I am AJ, and sitting across from me, my very astute co-host, Jason. Jason, how are you doing?
Doing great, AJ. It is cold as all get out this morning.
Freezing this morning. I think it was like 28 this morning, taking my kids to school.
I normally walk my kids to school, and today was a driving day. I couldn't do it.
Oh, so we not too long ago. I mean, it's been a few months, but we purchased a new vehicle, and so I got a truck, and that truck came with the remote turn on, start. I've never had that before in a vehicle. That is well, okay, I'll take that back. That is the second best thing. Maybe it tied with the second best thing about that truck, because it also has heated seats and it has a heated steering wheel. And that steering wheel, oh my gosh, that thing is worth its weight in gold. That
is a creature comfort right there.
Oh,
man.
yeah.
You get used to it, you'll never be able to go back.
Exactly. That's the frightening part.
But let me tell you a story. So I'm driving my kid to school this morning. You know, I drive one and then I come back, get the other one and drive her to her school because they go to different schools. But so I'm driving one and I'm going down, and there still are a lot of parents and kids out there walking to school, and I see them on the side and they're all bundled up like marshmallows.
They look like the Michelin Man, don't they?
Yeah, and should be, right? 28 degrees, and a slight breeze comes across. That's unbearable.
Yeah.
And then I look over to the right, and there's this family, well, mom and two kids and a dog, walking down, and she is in a short sleeve T-shirt.
There's always that one.
And the son is in a school T-shirt with just a T-shirt. Like no jacket, no nothing. So just the amount of time that it took me to get out of the car and walk to the school, okay, and get back in, my hands were aching cold. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I don't believe this to be a scenario from what having seen this family before. I don't believe it is a scenario where the family does not have. Yeah. Right? That there's a lack of clothing to be able to put on. Certainly there's no indication of that whatsoever. I think this was just a really poor decision.
Bad timing.
Oh, yeah. But down south, we do have that reality that there are a lot of families who may not have a lot of layers of clothes. So,
of course.
I'm not quick to jump past that supposition, but
of course. Yeah, no, it was too cold. I cranked the car up probably 5 to 7 minutes early just so it could get nice and warm inside. Of course, my kids are so bougie. They're like, "Did you crank the car up? Is it already warm when we get there?"
My girls ask me that regularly. I don't have the automatic crank. I have to run out there and do it and crank it up and run back in and wait on it.
Yeah, I had to do that for a while too.
So, but yeah. So, what you want to talk about today?
Today's episode is going to be interesting because it's coming from a listener question. I thought it'd be nice let's do another listener question. This one's a really, really good one. And it's dealing with what's called the Law of Diminishing Returns. It's an economic theory or law. So if you haven't had economics yet, you may not have heard this. But I thought it was a pretty good question. So that sound good to you?
Yeah, I teach economics. I was
about to say, are you apprised up on your economics? Because I am certainly not.
Yeah, I'm ready to discuss this one. And I know our listeners out there love it when we don't prepare at all for episodes.
Yes.
But yeah, I can talk about this one. This one will be good. Before we jump into it, though, remind everybody, visit us at Reschool'd.com. That's Reschool with a D, not an ED. Check us out on social media handles, of course, your favorite podcasting app and stuff. But just like our question came in today, and we're going to talk about that for an episode, drop us a line. Let us know what you're thinking. Give us some questions if you've got them. Give us some feedback on our stuff. If there's any episodes you particularly liked or didn't like, the didn't like, you can keep to your... No, just kidding. Yeah. Let us know.
Send us those emails personally.
Yeah. Send those directly to AJ.
Yes, right. Exactly. I'll take care of them.
Yeah. All right. So you want to jump in?
Yeah. So listener question. This is from Nate from Arizona. Hi, Nate. Greetings, AJ and Jason. In my economics class that I'm taking right now, the Law of Diminishing Returns was brought up, and I found it quite interesting. My question to you both is how can the law be applied to the college setting? Is it wise or even possible to use it as a strategy while going through college? Thanks for the advice. Love the show. Nate. So what you think about that?
We got some positive feedback in there at the same time.
Yeah, we got love the show.
I like it.
It would have been really awkward if he'd have been like, the show sucks, but I just wanted to give some advice. So
honesty, brutal honesty.
Yeah, just brutal honesty. All right, so do you know a lot about the law of diminishing returns?
I know a good bit. In the comparison there between on the aggregate side versus individual, we'll look at the micro side of it, just in your life. How does it apply?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not economics, but it is a concept that we use in accounting because you're talking about cost and profit and stuff like that too. I do know. I will say this. I shouldn't say I know because I did look this up. So let's kind of lay out the groundwork first. I went to the Encyclopedia Britannica. If you didn't know that was still a thing, it's still a thing.
You did do your homework.
Good job, AJ. I did because like I said, I knew it from a concept, but I didn't know like the technical definition. And so I do know it was. I think it was created by a Frenchman back in the 19th century when he was dealing with a plot of land. But it is also called the Law of Diminishing Marginal Productivity. And what it states in essence is if one input in the production of a commodity is increased while all other inputs are held fixed, a point will eventually be reached at which additions of the input yield progressively get smaller or diminishing increases in the output. So there will be a certain point where the more you put into something, you will not get the same. You will get a lower return back. So everything grows at a certain rate until you hit that threshold, and that yield is not as high as it was in the earlier inputs.
And when it comes to getting the most out of what you're doing, right? So there's another economics concept that comes up in there too. Mm-hmm. So we all have finite amount of time in our lives, right? Yep. We all have finite amount of resources, unless, I don't know, if you figure out a way to print money or you're Elon Musk or something like that, right?
Yeah, he's got it figured out.
Yeah, he somehow got something figured out. I don't know what he's got figured out, but what he's doing is doing. So
he's got it. Yeah, he's doing something.
There's something called the budget constraint, right?
Yeah, in accounting we call that the theory of constrained resources.
Okay, yeah. So there's finite amount of resources. That means you got a set amount, and you got to make a decision. Everything's a trade-off, and actually, that's the whole essence of economics. Mm-hmm. Economics says there's a trade-off because you can't do everything. Finite amount of time, finite amount of resources. You better allocate them to get the most out of what you're going to do. And if you're productively or allocatively efficient, you will, like I say, maximize the return on what you're doing. So in this scenario, when we talk about diminishing marginal return, well, the whole marginal thing just means, well, the next one you add, the next minute you spend, the next hour you spend, the next dollar you spend on something. What amount of value, in economics we say utility, right? But what amount of value is that going to return to you? That next thing that you put in. And okay, so there you go, right? Next thing you put in, how much value is it going to bring? Well, in theory, as long as something is bringing back more value to you than you're putting in, you can continue to put value into that. But that whole budget constraint thing, you've only got a finite amount of time. And you could think about that one thing as one more minute of studying, for example, right? But you could also be spending that minute working and making money, or doing an internship, or networking, or increasing your skill level. And we've talked about the difference between education and just developing skills, right? Or technical knowledge in something. So you could be allocating your time differently in a way. And so that's really the gist of the marginal productivity thing. You look at it and say, look, I want to be the most productive I can. I know what my intended outcome is. And I think that's where things get a little squirrely for everybody, right? Some people don't necessarily know what their intended outcome is. So how you gonna make those decisions, right? So that's kind of what we need to discuss for everybody. We need to throw it out there and say, all right, well, what are you getting out of what you're putting in? So how should you allocate your finite, your fixed amount of time, and your fixed amount of resources that you have? Because you got a lot going on in life. So my answer to this listener question, and we'll elaborate on this, is can you apply this principle of marginal productivity to your daily life? Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole essence of economics,
Yeah.
right? It's really about decision making. So, with that being said, yes,
Yeah,
you can.
it's. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say yes. You can apply that, and I think probably we should give you a few tips on how to do it.
Yeah, it's about peaking, because if in essence, what the law is talking about is, if you get some kind of output by putting 1 unit of work into it. So let's say if you put one unit of work into doing something, maybe studying or working at your job. Maybe working at your job is a good kind of example. But if you put 1 unit of work into doing something, you expect to get a certain amount of return out of it, maybe 1 unit of return back. Okay. If you put in 2 units of work, then you expect to get maybe 2.5 units back. And it increases. And then 3 will increase it so many units back. At a certain point, if you put 20 units in, you're not going to get this increase in return back. It's just going to start marginalizing. It's going to plateau. And that's the threshold that you're looking for. Is it worth it? Are you going to get the same increase as if you were to, have 1 unit less, or what you had in the previous one? There was a study that just came out. I believe it was in 2000. Let's see. Okay, I had to look this up because I wanted to vet this to make sure. So it's saying, okay, so in 2010, there was a study published that I believe won the person a Nobel Prize in economics, I think. And they were looking at a study of what is the threshold for income. What is the peak? Where is happiness peak when it comes to income? So how much does a person need to make in order to have that peak where the next level doesn't give you as much increase? Okay.
No, that's always been the $1 million question for people, right? Do I work harder to make more money, or do I work less and allocate my time to something else that would bring me more joy than that additional dollar, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, back to your, and that's just to paint this for everybody out there who's never had an economics class or anything like that. They usually show this thing with a curve, right? Yep. And they say, if I spend 1 minute of time or 1 hour of time or $1, whatever input you want to talk about, I'm going to get something out of that. And perhaps I spend 2 minutes worth of studying or $2, I'll get more value than I got before. Usually to a certain extent, the value you get by putting more effort is sometimes even exponential. Like I put in 1 minute, I get nothing out of it, or I get just a little bit. Yep. I put in 2 minutes, I get a lot. Yep. I put in 3 minutes, I get a real lot. I put in 4 minutes, I get a real lot, right? And each one is like, so you put in 1 minute and you're getting 1 unit of value, whatever that is, one amount of knowledge. You put in 2 minutes, you might get 3. You put in 3 minutes, you might get 6 or 10, and that's on that side of it. We call that economies of scale, right? Mm-hmm. You're putting more in and you're getting more from everyone you put in. Then you get into this where it levels out, where everything you put in, you just get it back. It's a constant return to scale. Mm-hmm. So you go from economies of scale, where everything you put in, you're getting, it's a windfall. You're getting so much back. Then you go into constant return of scale, where I put it in, I'm getting back. That's oftentimes where people start to think, wait a second, I'm putting in, I am getting back, but now is it worth it?
Yep.
Because I could put in that 1 unit of time, that $1 in a business or whatever. I could put that effort in to something else.
Yep.
Instead of this, and I might still be in the economies of scale side of that, and that might be worth more to me. 3 units of something else might be more valuable to me than just getting a 1-to-1 return on my time to effort over here. So that's where that whole, you got finite amount of time, you allocate it efficiently. That's your, your marginal return, what you get from every additional unit. You go from economies of scale to constant scale, and then you get to diseconomies of scale. So every additional minute you throw in, you get no return.
Yep.
No effort, no, or it starts to diminish. That is, you get less out of it than you put into it. And that's where you definitely should allocate your time elsewhere. AJ, have you ever hit the point when you were studying where you're like, all right, I've read all this, but it's so much. If I put any more effort into this, I'm getting nothing out of it.
There's no question. Like I've even told students, there is a point in time where you can study too much, and it starts to have the adverse effect. If you don't study,
you ask more questions.
Exactly.
Than
you
answers,
start getting confused. You start getting things mixed up. You start overthinking things. And it could be even more detrimental. And now, granted, that time that you allocate to studying is going to be, or the effort that you allocate to studying is going to be different for everyone, where that threshold is. But there is a certain time, like, I think there was, I can't remember the actual study. I'd have to go look it up, but I'm pretty sure there was a study that says like the average person could really only retain knowledge that they're either hearing or studying for about in 50-minute increments. And so if you're talking about somebody who is cramming the night before and they're pulling an all-nighter and they're doing this all the studying in a 8 to 9 hour block right before the exam, you're not getting anything out of it past, hour, 50-minute increments. That's one of the reasons. I think it was 50 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes. And the reason it's one of those two is because, that's how college classes typically are designed. They're hour and 15-minute classes, or 50-minute classes if they're 3 days a week. And so they're using that kind of knowledge to create those structures. So yeah, I mean, I in college, I think studying is one of those areas. Going back to that study though, with the peak of happiness, the 2010 Nobel Prize winner found that the peak happiness occurs when an individual earns $75,000 in annual earnings. And so past that, each dollar after that, it's not going to provide you the same return on happiness as the dollar prior to 75,000. And
is that adjusted around, because 75 grand doesn't go that far in New York City, but it goes pretty far in rural Georgia.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. I haven't. I'm just doing a really quick. I haven't read the actual article, but this was in 2010 also. Mm-hmm. So as you're going through this, the argument is, and actually this is all talking about that cliche: you can't buy happiness. Your money can't buy happiness. And but what this is talking about is they're saying essentially that after 75,000, in order to get more, you're going to have to put in more. And when you put in more, you lose that happiness. You're losing time, personal time. You're losing time with the family. You're losing vacation time. Yeah, you can easily make more money, but is it taking away, like you said, the trade-off? What's the trade-off of that? So now, flash forward to what? 13 years later, we're in 2023. I think this new one came out in 2021, maybe. A new researcher came out, economist, and this guy also won the Nobel Prize for economics as well on his. He redid it and found that the first study was slightly off. It was not 75,000 as the peak, or at least it is not now. Do you want to take a guess at what the new peak earnings is to have peak happiness?
Is that per person, adult, family?
I think it's per person. The way it's reading right now, like I said, I haven't read it. I'm just doing a really precursory research of it, but I think it's individual.
I would say it's much higher. I would say it was 150,000.
$500,000. Yeah, so this guy's you make $500,000 a year.
There's a lot of unhappy people in this world, me included.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, of course, fit 500, but then it goes back to the whole. Well, and one of the reasons why they're saying that is because There's tax implications that you have to consider. There's, again, different. Now, this is annual earnings. I don't know. I would have to go in there and look and see what they consider as earnings. Is it income or is it investment? Because I mean, that could be a possibility as well. Could it be, the appreciation of certain assets? There's a couple things that can go in there, but when I first heard that, and this is only 11-year difference, that's a mighty jump from 75,000 to $500,000. And but even that to me, like, if you talk about I think we all to a certain degree go into it. And, we were talking about Elon Musk, he has a significant amount of money, and the amount of money that he has, he will never be able to spend in his lifetime. Because he's at the point where any money he spends is going to yield even more return. And
it's not real money when you get that big, right?
Yeah,
it's really just the value of what you hold versus the value of what you owe.
I mean, there are many people. I think we've said this on a show before, but like there are plenty of wealthy people that are millionaires that are cash poor because all of it's wrapped up in assets. So, but there is a certain point where you have so much money that you're not going to get the same return, and then it goes into, well, are you getting that much money because you're working so hard? And what is that taking away from your life? Are you not actually having fun? Are you not able to go have, travel? Are you not able to go? Now, granted, again, you can look at it and going, well, once I have a certain amount of money, then I can just quit and do whatever I want. But
everybody values things differently.
Yeah, exactly.
If the only alternative thing you value is, speed racing a motorboat, well, you're not going to be happy until you can buy a motorboat that allows for speed racing. And those things are ridiculously expensive, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden you have to make a higher threshold to be able to do the alternative thing. Right. So anyway, but the point remains, the same here. You're going to get out of something an amount of value, what we call utility, but you're going to get amount of value out of whatever you do, okay, that is somehow related to what you put into it.
Yep.
Everybody's heard that old cliche, you get out of something what you put into it.
Yep.
And economics tries to help you understand that with a bunch of curves and theories and stuff like that. And that's that whole marginal, the theory of marginal productivity, right? The idea that what you're putting into something is going to return something. So you have to make decisions as to how much you put into it, as to how much you need or want to return. And does that apply to the school context? Oh my gosh, yes.
There's so many places that you can utilize this. And we were just talking
about your life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if school's a part of your life, school is that one thing. And then, of course, you're putting a lot of effort into that. But you also look at the alternative things and say, what is the comparison there? Like, for many people, school has a purpose, a career, knowledge in the field. You may be doing something else that gives you that. Then all of a sudden, which is giving you the most return career-wise? Is it the experience or is it the education? I would say early on, just getting an education career-wise is going to return more than experience. But after a certain point, experience and who you meet in the field is going to do more for you career-wise than additional education. Yep. And at some point, additional education has a diminishing marginal return because the only thing you'll be qualified to do is be a professor like us and make less than the people who work in industry.
Well, and, okay, so let's go into it. Let's start. The question of this, essentially, the episode is: what are some areas that students can utilize this law in college? So if we look at it from the broadest sense, and we'll start broad and then kind of work our way into for the student's purpose. But the first thing is really the return on college. Like you were just saying, there is a certain point where you have to understand what you need, and anything higher than that may not yield you that return that you're looking for. So for instance, if you're planning on going to a skilled trade, a skills trade, so electrician or HVAC or plumbing or anything like that, you probably don't need the return you're going to get from a bachelor's is not going to be at the same rate as the return you're going to get from an associate's or even just a certification. The cost is going to be a lot lower for associates or certification. The time investment is going to be a lot lower for associates or certification. And what you're going to make is going to be probably the same from the same career. So if you're going to go an electrician, whether you go to get a bachelor's or whether you go to get an associate's with certifications, whatever, they're probably going to be very comparable. It's not going to justify it. Now, if you go higher in certain areas, like you can get a master's electrician, that's going to boost you a little bit, but again, or quite a bit. But it's coming out of it, it's not going to generate the same return. Now, if you're talking about for me, I'll put mine out there. You know, I'm an instructor. I'm not technically a professor yet because I don't have a terminal degree. That's what I'm working on right now. I started teaching with a master's. Masters will only get you to a certain level, especially in certain fields. Accounting is just so high in demand that they use that a lot more. If I wanted to go get, which I am going to get my doctorate, the return on that, what I'll be able to move up to, justifies the extra time and effort that I'm putting into it. If I got like a $500 boost, it wouldn't do anything. Like it wouldn't even have been a thought. So there is a larger return. Now, if I take it the next step further and maybe go get a postdoc, is the return going to be there for my situation? No, because our college doesn't really deal with that. It doesn't have, it's not going to be a huge boost. So there's really no worry for me there. That's where my threshold is the doctoral degree. So first and foremost, you need to understand what you need and what the returns for each degree are going to be. Some are going to probably require, depending on where you're going, what area you're going to, some will only need a certification. Some will only need an associate's. Some will only need a bachelor's. Some, if you're going to start getting into upper level management, upper level executive positions, or I shouldn't say executives, but just the management positions, then you may want a master's. It may help you. And if it doesn't return on salary, it may return on demand, like the whole hiring process. You may become higher in demand. That's valuable because you have the ability to move. So there's like you were talking about, there's a bunch of different values that you have to consider. It may not always be dollars from salaries, which granted is a big one, but it also could mean, like I said, demand, or it could be time in the field. I can get into the field quicker. I can get those jumps in, raises and stuff like that. I can move up in my field quicker if I start quicker. So these are all things that you have to consider when you're just starting out in college. And we haven't even made it into college and how we can use this law. This is just picking out our path.
Yeah. Should we go to college or should we not?
Yeah.
And that law applies equally there as it does to, I would say the next thing would be on a daily basis. So say you've made the transition, you're going to go to college because that is part of the career path that you want to undertake, right? Well, then you have to ask the question, well, how is this going to return something for me? Well, the essence of college is deeper than just making grades and passing courses, right? Now it's broader. Now you should do internships. Now you should be involved in societies and clubs for networking purposes and all that kind of stuff. But if we just narrowed it down and said, you're going to college just to take classes, pass the classes, and to get a certificate at the end, a diploma that says you graduated. All right. Well, that's going to have a return on investment. We know that, right? So the question becomes, how much input do you have to put in just to get that? And is there going to be any additional benefits in terms of productivity that you need? Right. So if you get no utility out of making all A's, because you'll never go to graduate school and you'll never go into a career that cares anything about the grades you made. Okay. There's almost no utility in putting in the amount of time and work that it takes to get A's. But if you're going to go to medical school, for example, your whole passion, your whole life plan is to be an anesthesiologist. And I pick anesthesiology because it's one of the most difficult to get placements, right? You go to medical school, you look for matching at the end of it for your residency so you can practice that area of medicine, pass your boards, get certified, and practice. Well, anesthesia is one of the most demanding of them, okay? And even really, really good students don't get a placement to do their residency in that field. So they end up having to pick a completely different field of medicine to do. Or they do things in the interim and try to, they try multiple attempts to get into it, but it's very difficult, okay? In order to get into that, do you need to get into as highly a ranked medical school as possible? Yes. While you're in medical school, do you need to make the best grades possible so that you'll get the best residency match? Yes. All of those things count. So the productivity that you're measuring is how much time do I spend studying versus what is the result that I get out of it. Well, every A is extremely valuable. And if it just means you put in 3 or 4 more hours a week to get an A versus a B, or even however they measure it, A minus, B plus, whatever. Usually it's A or B. But if you have to put in that little bit more time, when I say little, whatever the input is, you have to put in more time. If the value that you get out of it is extreme, like the scenario where you're going to medical school, then that affects your decision making, how you allocate your time. Because you networking, right? You going out there meeting people. In our first scenario, where you're going into a career field where what you made in college does not matter. It just matters that you got a degree. Then those extra hours spent on studying do not return much productive output. Your time would be way better spent networking. But if you're going to medical school, your time would be better spent not networking, putting those extra hours into studying so that you can get an A. Because if you get an A, that translates into a higher likelihood that you will get into a better, when I say better, more highly ranked. We still work on rankings, as bad as that is, right? But that's our system. That you would get into a higher ranked medical school. And the same goes as you continue through medical school. Is it worth putting in the extra time rather than networking so that you get better grades and can get a better placement for residency? The answer is yes on both of those. But for the first person, the person who's going into a career where grades don't matter, in that situation, you would choose to allocate your time differently because the return, the marginal return, the marginal productivity of that next hour of studying is not very good.
No. And I was, as you were speaking, I was creating I got a spreadsheet open just because I thought it would be interesting to look at this. I've never done it this way. I mean, I've obviously it's for most of us, it's just common knowledge to see it this way, but I've never actually seen the numbers to do this. So let's just say you're a student and you're going into college and your first decision, so you know what you have to do. You're going to get a bachelor's, so you're there. So the next question is, how many classes do you take a semester? And I'm not including summer. I'm just doing fall and spring. And you go through and you're looking at it. And this is probably, to me, one of the best examples of the law of diminishing returns in a college setting. So and this is all things considered equal, except the number of hours that you take within a fall and a spring semester, so a year. And you have to have 120 in most bachelor's programs, okay? If you take one class or 3 hours in the fall and then 3 hours in the spring, so I'm just saying 3 hours per semester, it'll take you 20 years to graduate, okay?
Wow.
Yeah, okay? If you doubled that and made it 6 per semester, then it's going to cut the time in half to 10 years. So you have a 0.5 decrease in time, okay? Mm-hmm. And then if you go to 3 classes per semester, So 9 hours total in each semester, so 18 total for the year. It's going to take you 6 2/3 years to complete, which means it's going to decrease that one extra class where it decreased it the first time by half. It's only decreasing it by 2/3 now. So the difference is, 0.167, essentially what it is, just by adding another class. Okay, if you add another class to 12 hours per semester, it's going to take you 5 years to complete, which means it only decreases the initial time by 75%. So that's only a difference of 0.083 or 8.3% change in an additional class. And then if you go to the standard 15, which is what most we think, it's 4 years to complete, which is a decrease of 8. So each time you add an extra class, yes, it makes it cuts the time by each class you add. It cuts the time a little bit, but the more you add, the return on that cut isn't going to be the same. It actually decreases every single time. And then if you get to 18, 21, and 24, if you were able to take 24 hours in a semester, which is 8 classes typically, it'll take you 2.5 years to complete. Again, assuming all things are equal. They're not. Because at a certain point, when you take too many classes, you run that problem of the theory of constrained resources. There's not enough time in the day for you to be able to do all the responsibilities that go into a class. So you may think you're taking 24 hours and you're going to graduate early. However, you may not be able to keep up with it. Grades are going to start tanking, and you're going to actually have to take classes over and over again, which means you're going to go right back to that 4 or 5 years. It's just not advantageous. The return is not there to add an additional class in your semester. I see this a lot when I get to, when I talk to students, when we go through registration when it comes to summer classes. They're like, oh, I want to take 5 classes in the summer. I'm like, no, you don't. I mean, you choose whatever you want to do, but I highly suggest you don't do that because you just don't have enough time.
And, all of a sudden there's other factors in there too. Money.
Yeah.
Right? You may not be able to get the same loans for the summer, and technology fees are different. Scholarships oftentimes apply differently. How many? Very few people spend the time calculating how should I allocate my time versus the assistance that I'm receiving to go to college. In Georgia, we have the Hope Scholarship and things like that. So you start to say, well, maybe I should take 12 hours each quarter or each semester and then take a few hours during the summer, where your scholarship may not apply to those summer months. So all of a sudden the cost of school just went up considerably for you, for something that perhaps it would have been marginally productive for you to put in the additional time as to what it cost you, particularly if the cost of school is a real constraint for you. And for most students out there, most families, it is. Some people have resources already. You're born with them, you inherited them, or you were very proactive and made a lot of money before going to school. Well, then all of a sudden money may not be a constraint, right? So in a word, we're talking about a general principle that should apply to every aspect of our life. And we could run down probably 100 scenarios in school, but it's all going to come down to the same situation. You have a finite amount of time and resources. You have to figure out how to allocate them. Putting too much effort into one area of school, whether that area of school is your athletics, if you play sports, whether it's academics, the equation changes a little bit if you're on scholarship and have to achieve a certain GPA versus not. The career path you're going to go into, meaning that, hey, do you have to make really good grades, or is it more important that you spend more time doing other things like internship, in the field experience, networking, that type of thing? So you have to answer all these questions about, if I, of this finite amount of time and resources I have, if I put my effort and resources into one area, there's going to be less time and resources in another area. So choose wisely. Make certain that what you're getting out of whatever you pursue is of more value to you than the value you would get from allocating that same time to something else, like networking, like clubs, like athletics, like whatever it is, right?
You brought up a good point too. Like you're talking about health. Health is a great example of the law of diminishing returns. Because if you're talking about working out, if you're talking about going to the gym for 30 minutes, that's going to give you a return. If you go for an hour, that's going to give you a return. If you go to the gym for 7 hours or 8 hours a day, that's only going to get you a certain return. Like there's only so much you're going to be able to lift. And
if you if you want to be a bodybuilder, then the return might be higher, but not everybody wants to do that, right? Being a bodybuilder might have zero utility to some people, right?
Yeah, not me. It's just not on my plate. Are there? So we talked about just college in general. So the degree that you're going for. We talked about the hours that you take in a semester. We talked about studying. We talked about athletics and health and stuff like that. Is there any other ones that you can think of where it's obviously we've pretty much honed it into there's infinite amount of ways that you can apply the law of diminishing returns. Any major ones that you can think of off the top of your head?
The one I just want to focus on is the one we've kind of beat to death already. Once you've made the decision that you are going to go to college, okay, versus other options, allocating your time effectively during this experience, because I've spoken at length on this show about what you get out of college is so much more than just your classes, right? There's skills-based knowledge and training. There's education, which is the overall experience and exposure, the value of networking, getting to know the people beside you, experiencing things that you otherwise have not or would not, like studies abroad, like internships, like participation in club or even, college level varsity teams, things like that. Fraternities, sororities, all of these sorts of things. All of these are decisions. Okay. And so I just want to make certain that everyone out there realizes that there is no right combination in and of itself. It's all about what you get the most value out of, and whether that value is going to come in the short term or the long term is once again a question for you to decide which is more important. Maybe you're not in the best position to evaluate that now, and honestly, if there's a disconnect between you and your parents or you and the people around you about, hey, you're not trying hard enough, or you're not making good enough grades, or you're really not pursuing this career path the way as hard as you should, or blah, 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 the things you hear from parents and friends and whatever. Well, usually all that is a disconnect between where you believe you're getting your utility. If you value your free time more, if you value the experience of college, if you value being around a significant other or groups of friends more than the value you believe you're getting from getting an A from a class, then you are going to allocate your time and effort differently. Now, does that make you rational or irrational? Who knows, right? Our assumption is everybody's making rational decisions, right? We know that's not true. That's why we have the field of behavioral economics, which works in psychology into that mix to try to say how people are different in their determination of what's in their best interest. But that being said, if you can keep that in mind, right, you have to figure out what's right for you. But as long as you look at it in terms of what's the return on what I put in, there you go. You are prepared.
How do we forget? I mean, speaking about, we're talking about college and law of diminishing returns. How do we not use alcohol as a prime example? One drink will get you so far, and then 2 drinks will get you a little bit further. But there's a certain point in time where that next drink is pretty much going to end it for you.
Yeah, that is a true diseconomy of scale, right? One drink, you all of a sudden you're
fine.
Kind of lighten your load. You're having a good time. 2 drinks, maybe a little bit more. 3 drinks, all of a sudden, whew. Yeah. That there's not a lot of constancy to return there, right? If once people can master that area, that constant return,
Once you hit the end of a 12-pack and you hit that 13th one, the return's not going to. It's just going to be all the same at that moment until you hit blackout.
until you go get your stomach pumped.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so not to make light of that, and college. This is a cliche for college students about drinking too much in college and things like that. Hopefully, you don't take part in that.
Hopefully,
I'm not saying don't drink. Right,
Yeah.
That's your choice. And I'm not saying. I'm just saying don't do anything that's going to hurt yourself.
Yes, no kidding. Well, this has been a great episode. Thanks to Nate for sending in this question. I've enjoyed it. Refreshing to get to the economic side and out of the accounting side. So
yeah, that was fun. A practical application of classroom material. Before we jump out of here, though, everybody send us more questions like that. We want to hear about it. And the way you do it, visit our website. That's where you see all our old episodes. That's where you read what's going on with us. You obviously can reach out to us. You can see the platforms where our podcast is listed if you use multi-podcast platforms, that type of thing. And you listen to a show right on there. You can pop into the your favorite podcasting app and give us those likes, that type of thing. You want to share it with somebody else, you can share our website, or you can share the podcast from one of your apps there too. So you got all those options. So please do that if you can. If you would, we'd appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, we hope you enjoyed the show. Until next time, we hope to see you there. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.